Max had always been a dog full of love. His fur was soft and thick, his tail a constant blur of excitement, and his eyes, though once bright, had slowly faded into a dull, cloudy mist. The vet had told his family years ago that Max's vision was deteriorating. At first, it was just a minor problem. He had trouble finding his toys, stumbling over objects that had once been familiar to him. But over the years, it got worse. Now, at 5 years old, Max was fully blind. His family, his mother, father, and two young children had become his world, guiding him through every day with patience, love, and care. They had always loved him, even when his world was nothing but darkness. But there was hope. Max's family had found a veterinary clinic specializing in a new surgery that could restore his sight. The procedure wasn't guaranteed to work, but it was a chance, one they couldn't ignore. The family had saved for months, researching, consulting with doctors, and finally deciding that it was worth the risk. They had heard stories of dogs regaining their sight after the surgery, and each of those stories had fueled their hope. Today was the day. As the family gathered around Max, preparing him for the surgery, the atmosphere was thick with emotions. His mother knelt down beside him, rubbing his ears with a soft, reassuring touch. Her fingers trembled slightly as she whispered, "It's okay, Max. You're going to be all right. We'll be right here when you wake up." Her voice cracked with emotion, the weight of the moment heavy in her heart. Max, sensing her anxiety, tilted his head slightly, as if trying to comfort her. His tail gave a slow wag, but his eyes, those eyes that had always been full of warmth and understanding, remained clouded and distant. The father knelt beside them, placing a hand gently on Max's back. "You're a strong boy, Max," he said, his voice firm but soft, trying to hide the lump in his throat. "We're all going to be right here with you." Max nuzzled his father's hand, a soft whine escaping his throat as he felt their presence, their love. The children, too, took turns hugging Max, their tiny hands resting on his soft fur. They kissed his head, whispering promises to him, as if somehow they knew this surgery could change everything. The surgery was about to begin. The vet gently took Max from their arms, and as he was led away, the family watched him go with a mixture of hope and fear. They knew the risks, but they also knew they couldn't let Max live the rest of his life in darkness. As the door closed behind him, the house fell silent, and the family sat together, their faces etched with anticipation. Hours passed. The waiting room was quiet, save for the occasional shuffle of footsteps or the faint hum of a distant machine. Max's family sat together, glued to their phones, checking for any updates. The father fidgeted with his watch, his eyes flicking to the clock on the wall every few seconds. The mother ran her fingers through her hair, her gaze distant. The children played quietly with their toys, occasionally glancing up at their parents, sensing the tension in the air. Each minute felt like an eternity, and the seconds seemed to drag on endlessly. They were so close to the moment that could change Max's life forever. Finally, the door opened. The surgeon, a kind-looking woman with glasses perched on her nose, entered the room with a soft smile that did little to mask her own excitement. She had a clipboard in hand, and her eyes were bright. "Max is doing well," she said, her voice calm but warm. "The surgery went smoothly. We'll need to keep him under observation for a little while, but I think you'll be able to see him soon." A collective sigh of relief passed through the room. They had been so worried, so unsure of what the outcome would be. The mother's hands shook as she clasped them together, and the father wiped a tear from his cheek, the weight of the day finally lifting. They followed the surgeon down a sterile hallway, the faint sound of their footsteps echoing through the corridor, until they reached a quiet recovery room. There, lying on a soft bed, was Max, groggy but alive, his bandages still covering his eyes. The family gathered around him, speaking softly, their voices full of hope. "Max, it's us," his father whispered, kneeling beside the bed, his hand gently resting on Max's head. "We're here, buddy." Max's ears twitched at the familiar sound of his father's voice, and his head shifted slightly, as though he were trying to make sense of the world around him. His breathing was slow but steady, and his body seemed to relax as he recognized the comfort of his family. The surgeon, noticing the shift in Max's demeanor, nodded and began to carefully remove the bandages from his eyes. With each movement of the bandage, the anticipation in the room grew. The soft rustle of fabric was all they could hear. And then, when the last of the bandages was removed, the room seemed to hold its breath. Max's eyes were revealed for the first time in years. The light seemed so bright to him, and for a moment he blinked several times, his eyes adjusting slowly to the unfamiliar light around him. His head tilted slightly, a look of confusion and curiosity crossing his face. He sniffed the air, his nose twitching as he processed the new sensations flooding his senses. The family held their breath, watching him closely, their hearts pounding in their chests. His eyes blinked again, this time a little more deliberately, and then, slowly, so slowly, Max's gaze lifted. His eyes locked with his mother's. For the first time in so long, Max saw her face, the face that had been his world. Her eyes were soft, filled with tears, and her smile shone with such intensity that Max could feel her love radiating toward him. His tail began to wag, slow at first, unsure, but then faster and faster, gaining momentum as he recognized the woman he had always known by scent and touch, but never by sight. His entire body seemed to relax, as if a weight had been lifted. His mouth parted slightly, and he let out a small, happy whine. It was the softest sound, but it spoke volumes. "I see you," it said. Tears welled up in his mother's eyes, and she reached out to stroke his head, her hand trembling. "Max," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. "Oh my gosh, Max!" Max's gaze shifted, and his eyes widened as they took in the faces of his father and children. They were real. They were in front of him. And then, as if he could no longer contain his joy, he jumped up, his paws landing lightly on his father's lap. His tail wagged furiously, and he licked his father's face, his eyes shining with uncontained joy. "Max," his father said, laughing through his tears, "you're home." Max then turned toward the children, his eyes scanning their faces with new wonder. The children giggled and dropped to their knees, their faces beaming with excitement. "Max, you can see us now!" they shouted in unison, their voices full of astonishment. Max, overwhelmed with love, jumped and ran in circles, his newfound sight allowing him to navigate with more freedom than he had ever known. He dashed to the back door and without hesitation bounded outside, his nose catching the scent of the grass and the breeze. The sunlight, warm and golden, bathed the yard in a soft glow, and Max hesitated for a moment, taking in the world around him. He sniffed the air deeply, and then, with a burst of energy, he ran. The grass, the trees, the sky, they were all new to him, and yet they felt familiar, like something he had always known in his heart. His family followed him outside, laughing as Max dashed around the yard, exploring every inch of it. The joy on his face was undeniable, and the family shared in his excitement, their hearts overflowing with love. Max raced to the fence, paused to sniff the flowers, and then rolled in the grass, his body twisting with pure joy. As the day drew to a close, the family gathered back inside, exhausted but happy. Max lay down on his favorite rug by the fireplace, curling up in a ball, his eyes fluttering closed. The children snuggled up beside him, their small hands stroking his fur as they sat in peaceful silence. Max's mother gently ran her fingers through his fur, a soft smile on her face. She looked at her husband, her eyes shining. "We did it," she said, her voice full of gratitude. Max's world had changed forever. He had always been loved, but now he could see that love reflected in the faces of those around him. He was no longer just a blind dog. He was a miracle, a testament to the power of hope, love, and second chances. And as he drifted off to sleep that night, the warmth of his family surrounding him, he knew that no matter what, he would never have to face the darkness alone again.